Welcome back, everybody, to the Classic Rock podcast. And coming up in this show, we'll start with a review of the end of year's music press. Who's saying what about the year so far? What were the greatest albums and standout events? We'll find out in just a minute. Our special guest in this show is Don Dokken, who looks ahead to a new album with Dokken in 2022. And he takes us on a journey back to LA in the 1980s. To talk about what it was really like down on the Strip at the time of Van Halen, Quiet Riot, Motley Crue and the rest. All of those epic tours that they were on with the likes of Aerosmith and AC/DC, and whilst all around him were sinking into a cocaine-fueled existence, why he steered well clear, preferring champagne and wine, and of course pulling the odd wheelie or two on the old Harley with his girlfriend on the back down the Strip. Now, before all of that, just a reminder, if you've missed any of the recent shows, then you can catch up with all of them via the website at www.theclassicrockpodcast.com or by any of the main streaming providers, including Amazon, Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Google, etc. Recent shows has had some great guests: Bernie Marsden, Jeff Downs, Doug Aldrich of the Dead Daisies, of course, and Dave Brock, the Hawkwind legend, and most recently, Mark Farner from the American band Grand Funk Railroad. Let's take a look then at what is in the press at the end of the year. Everybody, of course, is running a best of 2021. What actually is really surprising, I think, when you sit back and look at the year that is just gone, is the quality of what we've actually seen released this year. I know everybody tends to say that rock music and its related genres are now dead, but couldn't be further from the truth, really. Classic Rock Magazine lists its top 50. Dead Daisies only make number 48 with On Deadly Ground. Surprised about that. Glenn Hughes is in rampant form on that album, and I saw him live recently, and he is an actual force of nature, isn't he? Incredible. Styx' Crash of the Crown, another great album, only making 28, a real throwback to the glory days for them. And Cheap Trick, what can you say about a band that continues to put out such high quality albums? Another World, one of my favourite albums of this year, makes number 13, and if you haven't heard it or you missed it, then give it a listen, because literally from start to finish, there's not a piece of filler on it. In fact, I think you should listen to some now. There you go. Something a little different. Had a bit of a festive feel to it, that, didn't it? They're not all like that. There's a lot of up-tempo pop rock songs in the true Cheap Trick style, but it is one of their best albums for a long old time, that I can tell you. Thunder's All the Right Reasons, number 12, their best album since Laughing on Judgment Day in the 90s. They're on tour in the new year, and if you've never seen them live, what have you been doing? I mean, really, one of the best live bands around. Their top 5, Billy Gibbons' Hardware, which to all intents and purposes is what we would have got had there been a ZZ Top album. Tough year for them, wasn't it? Joe Bonamassa, Time Clocks, is next. The Wild Hearts, 21st Century Love Song, at number 2 in their list of the top 50 albums is Mammoth, Wolfie Van Halen. I'm not sure about that. But I am sure about the number 1, an album of such staggering diversity. Iron Maiden's Senjutsu, easily the best album of the year. And when you think they've been sitting on this for the last 18 months, how that never got leaked out, God only knows. But it is easily, I think, their best album since the mid-1980s. And I think it is up there with Seventh Son. I think it's up there with Somewhere in Time. I think it's up there with Power Slave, and I think it's up there with The Number of the Beast, although we're talking about two different bands, really. But much, much better album than Book of Souls, which I thought was a bit meandering and a bit ponderous and a bit, let's be honest, a bit pompous. But this just classic. Iron Maiden. There you go. Iron Maiden's Senjutsu Best Album of 2021. And although many of these songs on the album are 6, 8, 10, 12, 15 minutes long, the greatest compliment you can pay it is they don't seem long. There you go. The purists will tell you, of course, that the Number of the Beast, etc., are always the best and they're not the same. But if you haven't given this a listen, you really need to do so over the holidays. Just going through that magazine, sort of 20 things you didn't know about Destroyer by Kiss, such as it was originally going to be called Dynasty until their business manager's son was stood there one day and said, "Hey, why didn't you call it Destroyer?" So they did. In the reviews, Neil Young and Crazy Horse album Barn gets a 9 out of 10. This is a very good album. There might be darkness outside, but the barn is lit up by the old man playing country rock and roll. Metal Hammer did a best of 2021, the year metal bounced back, they said. Iron Maiden Senjutsu landed at number 3 in their long list. Mojo have got Neil Young front cover. It's incredible the amount of press that Neil Young actually gets. They're looking forward to a new album from the Stones in 2022 with work done with the late Charlie Watts. Same with ZZ Top. They will complete recordings done with Dusty Hill before his passing this year. What is number 1 on the Mojo playlist this month? It is Billy Gibbons' Jingle Bell Blues. No, we're not going to play that. Big feature on Deep Purple, 50 years on from Machine Head. In my teens, I could do pole vault, said Ian Gillan. I can't do it anymore, but I can still try. They got a new covers album out, remember, turning to crime, some good songs on that. Uncut Paul Weller front cover there, 2022 preview looks ahead to new albums by The Faces, 50 years on from the last one. The Stones as well. Next year is their 60th anniversary as well. And they've got the story of the Eagles' first album recorded in the freezing cold at Olympic Studios in London in 2022. What am I talking about? 1972. Good piece in Shindig magazine this month about the music of Steppenwolf, their front cover. Their music has been used in 85 feature films and 120 TV shows. That song, of course, I would imagine accounted for most of it. John Kay is interviewed. Don't hear from him very often. He goes back to the very early days. He spent the first 5 years of his life in East Germany. He didn't actually come over to North America. He was in Toronto, where he landed, when he was 14 with his family. That song, incidentally, Born to Be Wild, wasn't actually a first choice track for a 45. It was a toss-up between that and a track called The Next One. You often find that, don't you, with songs that turn out to be iconic songs. It was the same with Batman Turner Overdrive's You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet. The album there was completely finished. I remember talking to Randy Batman about this, and he said the record company executive came in and they were sat down giving the album a listen. They said, "Hey, guys, you know, the one thing you miss here is a single, you know, a standout track, a single track." And they said, "Well, we got this song, which was a throwaway thing, you know, it won't be any good." And the rest, of course, is history. Finally, in this little press section, I wanted to make mention of a guitar player who did the greatest guitar solos of all time. There's a reader's poll, plus the likes of Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, Andy Summers, here the Police, Steve Morse, loads and loads of great players debating their favourite tracks and what they were. And the reader's poll, always interesting this, isn't it? So what would you think were the greatest guitar solos of all time? Top 5, Hotel California. Number 5, the Eagles. Bohemian Rhapsody of 4. Led Zeppelin, Stairway to Heaven at number 3. At number 2, Eruption by Van Halen. At number 1, the greatest guitar solo that has ever been put on a piece of acetate ever was, wait for it, Comfortably Numb by Pink Floyd. Yeah, I can see a few of you looking to the ceilings, throwing your tea and coffee around. What are they talking about? What do they know? Comfortably Numb? What happened to Freebird? What happened to Jimi Hendrix? Where's Jeff Beck? Where's Eric Clapton? Well, they do all appear, actually. I think Skinner's Freebird was in the top 10, and Hendrix's All Along the Watchtower was number 6. But that's what makes those polls good for little mentions in programs like this, because it sets a debate going, doesn't it? Raging around the firesides of rock fans all over the world. Now, the 1980s, great decade, if for nothing else, for the fact that there were so many variants, weren't there, of rock music on offer. We had hard rock, we had heavy metal, we had glam rock, we had melodic rock, we had AOR, we had the new wave of British heavy metal, and on and on and on. A rock genre for every mood and season. But every time the discussion gets going on this, it homes in on the usual names: Def Leppard, Van Halen, Guns N' Roses, Bon Jovi, Scorpions, all the usual ones, of course. But we are going elsewhere. So, where are we going? What constitutes success? Well, sales usually is a good point. So if you'd sold over 10 million albums worldwide, the majority in that decade, then you were right up there amongst the most successful bands of the era. And that's where Dokken come in. Perhaps don't get the dues that they deserve, because if you go back and revisit the catalogue, you'll find a really great selection of rock, pop rock, hard rock, melodic rock, ballads that still sound great even today, as 40 years plus on. So I thought it was high time we gave them a bit of a feature. So I gave Don a call, and we ended up chatting for a good couple of hours about the band, relationships, the tours, the hits, the huge success, what it was like at the start, working the Sunset Strip in the 80s, playing alongside the legends Van Halen, Quiet Riot, Motley Crue, etc. And 2022 is going to be a big year for them as well, because there is a new album. It has already been recorded, it's ready to mix, and it will be out, well, in a few months. To whet your appetite then, before we get into the conversation, let's go back 40 years to the first track of the very first Dokken album. Breaking the Chains, the debut album from Dokken. That was the debut track. It was released back in 1981 as a Don Dokken solo album on the Carrera record label. You might remember it if you've got any old 45s and albums. I do, because it was the same label as Saxon. It was a purple label. Now, we're on the eve of 2022. You've got a new album coming out. You're touring. You've got a couple of big dates at the Whiskey coming up this week before Christmas. We're seeing you and George together more often. It all seems to be good karma. Nothing negative. Life then, it seems pretty good at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's good, you know. We have some big festivals, like in Florida, 30,000 people. So sometimes they're huge festivals, and then you have the theaters and you have clubs. And so life is good. I mean, it's been, I think it was rough for everybody for COVID. 2020 was like a year you just take that page and throw it away. It was just a bad time.
First album since Broken Bones in 2012. How difficult has it been to record with the band dispersed all over the country? And at the start, as you say, you couldn't play guitar either.
Yeah, was been the big bummer, is I can't play guitar anymore because of what happened to my right hand. But, I had to deal with it. it took some time emotionally, saying you can't play guitar anymore, or piano, or bass, or drums. I had to wrap my head around that. They kept saying, give it a year, give it a year, give it a year. I still do occupational therapy 3 days a week at the gym. And, but no, the hand's dead. So, and most of the arm. So it's changed my life because I'm right-handed, and you don't think about it until you can't use it. I mean, you know, I tell my boys, it's my joke, running joke is now that when I get up in the night and pee, and use my left hand, I feel like I'm cheating on myself.
So tell me, in terms of the musical direction on this album, you've said that you're going, quote, retro. And this, let's be honest, this is a good thing because we're going to get this classic sound again.
Yeah, that was the not problem, but I mean, when people want, I mean, we had a previous record deal with another label, and they basically said the only thing the contract said, the album must sound like a cross between Tooth and Nail and some other and on Rock Key. I go, well, I can't do that. I can't guarantee that because my head's not in that. Wherever I was spiritually, in '85 or '6 it is what it is. I write what I write. And when people say, what are you inspired by? I go, well, what's going on in the world? I mean, my life. And then I wrote songs like, Empire on one of my albums, because, all the whole Pakistani, Afghanistan, Syria war, the Russians coming in, invading other countries, you write about that, so that gives you the inspiration to write lyrics to say, but when it's all said and done, all you have is left, is a broken empire. In other words, you're invading a country. By the time you get it, it's all rubble. like in Pakistan, they've leveled those towns to nothing. They don't exist anymore. So, and right now, I'm glad I'm done with the record because I don't like to get political. So, because I have no control. Nobody really does. I mean, I'm just one person, and they say, well, one vote counts. But, I am kind of disheartened about what's going on in America. And I'm glad that I was not born in this generation. I don't see what my children are now early 30s have much to look forward to, even though they have great jobs. And my son's a pilot and flies around on JetBlue. But I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, the new generation just seems disenfranchised, broken spirited. They don't want to get an education. They don't want to work. They don't want to do anything. They just want to sit around and get high. And I see it every night at these clubs. Because sometimes we go back to the hotel and people are partying and they're just terrorizing. And also I think that the morality of how you would say it, I guess you could call me an elderly person. I mean, kids have no respect for their parents anymore and respect for their elders. Like, God, in the 30s and 40s, when your grandparents got old, you took care of them. And now they just kick them to the curb and throw them in a home and say, see you later. But I think in England, in Europe, I think their people are different. You take care of your mom and pop, and that's more of especially in Italy and England and Germany, you take care of your grandparents. But in America, it doesn't seem that way.
It's a shame.
It is a shame.
Are we gradually seeing more, or we are gradually seeing more of you with the old boys? George is back. You did that mini Japanese tour with the classic lineup back in 2016, which was the first time. It was amazing. For 21 years, you were all together. The reception was great. It was well received. Are we moving a step closer to a fully fledged reunion of the classic lineup? Obviously, virus permitting. A proper tour, maybe an album?
No. I mean, sorry, no. I mean, for many reasons. Jeff's been in Foreigner now for like 24 years. and he's very happy being in Foreigner. Even though I couldn't handle that gig. There's no original members. It's a copy band, and but I couldn't do it. I mean, supposedly Mike Stone's in the band, but he shows up one every 50 shows or something like that. And then Mick, which to me was a huge part of Dokken, the way he played drums, very like Bonham, hard hitter. It reminds me of Zeppelin. When Bonzo died, they said, "Okay, it's over." They couldn't imagine going on without Bonham. So, and then Mick, a couple of years ago when he blindsided me. We only had 2 shows left on our U.S. tour. We got to the airport, and actually the show we were playing that next night was at his hometown. So he got to go home and sleep in his own house. And he pulls me aside at the airport and said, "I'm done." I said, "You're done?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm done. I can't do it anymore." Just worn out.
Yeah.
Like a football player, I mean, I always tell people, what's the hardest job? The singer, the front man. Nah, it's the drummer. Come on, can you imagine taking your foot and your kneecaps and they're bent and just hitting that kick drum tens of thousands of times over 50 years? You started when he was 10 years old. They wear out. Your knees are gone, your rotator cuffs, your shoulders are same thing that Neil Peart said in Rush. He says, "I can't play like I could, so I can't go on if I can't play 100%. Because he had the same thing. He just got worn out, So that changed. So as far as a reunion, I know that George and Jeff have side projects, and they've asked Mick to play. And he did a couple of years ago. He did a couple track, but he flat out said, "No, I'm done. I sold my drums. I won't play again."
I was looking back through your life story, fascinating life story. Your musical journey began a long old time ago, didn't it? Do you remember much about that day that you got on stage as a 14-year-old in the shopping mall up in that place, Incline Village in Lake Tahoe, and performed Louie Louie and Gloria?
Yeah, I do actually. I mean, I don't even remember who I was playing with. And, it was kids from high school. I was only like, I don't know what I was, a freshman in high school. And I remember it, yeah, because, they had a little stage and, shopping center, stores opening up. The only thing I mostly remember about it's kind of a blink, is my mom was there and she was still alive. And my friends were all there. And I just remember the adrenaline, the excitement of, playing in front of people for the first time. That was the thing I remember most, that I'm like, man, this is, I got the bug. Let's put it that way.
As much as your voice is very recognizable, obviously, you weren't originally the vocalist, were you? Didn't you get thrust into the limelight at the front of the stage when your vocalist didn't actually show up one night in the very early days?
Yep. And I think that night we were playing with Van Halen, I think.
This was at a place called the Proud Bird, wasn't it, in LA?
Right. That God, you got your information. Yeah, and that was just this restaurant still there.
I looked it up. It is.
It's still there, and it's like a banquet hall, and you can't miss it when you start driving to the airport. They have some jets out next to the restaurant. There's all these jets, sitting there, old military jets and war jets, and that's why they call it. Looks like a military thing, but yeah, I remember that, and I also remember that show because I'd never played with Van Halen before, and I'd heard of Eddie Van Halen, and I heard he was the hotshot guitar player in his neck of the woods, which is more Pasadena, Orange County, and I was kind of like the local singer, guitar hero in my neck of the woods down at the beach area, South Bay. But when the singer was a no-show and he says, "I don't feel like playing," I didn't know what to do. And I went, we're screwed now.
What happened to the singer?
So
did he go off? Did you ever hear from him again?
Yeah, over the years, I'd crossed paths with him. He had inherited some money, kind of tragically, from his parents passing, and he opened up a clothing store in Santa Monica on it's called the Third Street Promenade, and he had that store for decades, and it was a giant building, and then that street got turned into a walk street. It's very posh, and he had like some crazy long lease, and Apple came along and said, "We want to buy your lease." He didn't even own the building; he just had a lease, and they gave him like millions of dollars to buy him out. So he was just selling like used jeans and surfer stuff, old surfboards, and I still have an old cashmere trench coat I bought from him. It's like 50 years old. I still wear it,
Uh,
and I bought it for about $20. And but that's what he did. He had money, and he was a good singer. But then I was kind of about, I don't know, 25 years later, he gave me a CD he had just made. It was like a Christian rock
yeah,
kind of music, but I thought he was singing very strangely. And I thought, well, that's not the singer I remember. The guy really had chops. He sounded like kind of a joke. He kind of sounded like Steve Perry.
wow.
And he had the look and the long hair. But if your heart's not in it, your heart's not in it.
You were playing at the whiskey, as you said, with all of these legendary acts of the time, Van Halen, Quiet Riot, another one. What was the environment
Yeah.
like? Was it very competitive between you all, or were you like this band of brothers all searching for the big break?
No. In my opinion, it was all just pure competition. It was like, everybody wanted to outdo everybody else. But that's when even though I started singing, I started focusing more on vocals because after the first time I saw Van Halen, which I've said many times, I was up in my dressing room, listening to them playing in the background. And I think I said to my bass player at the time, who was the original bass player, Jeff Tappan, I said, I thought they only had one guitar player. It sounded like two. And so I walked out and looked over the balcony and I said, what the hell's he doing? With the two hands in the neck thing.
Yeah,
And I just never seen that before because my whole type of guitar playing was like, Richie
oh,
Blackmore,
yeah,
Mark Farner. I was more into those kind of guys. Blackmore was my hero, and you know, those are the bands that I learned on. So I didn't know anything about this tapping thing. Now every guitar player on the planet does it,
did you
and to
meet
me, it's so
Richie?
neurotic.
By the way, you ever met
Oh
Richie?
yeah, I met. Yeah, we're friends. Every time somebody, a couple people have played with him and went to his house in New York, and they'd say, "Yeah, I know Don." They say he always says, "Hey, say hello to Don for me."
You were great
So
friends with
we,
Eddie Van Halen as well, weren't you? Must have had many
uh,
great memories of working alongside him and, just hanging out together.
yeah, hanging out. Yeah, I just came across a picture. Yeah, I bought a new phone and I was downloading 8 million photos, and I came across this picture of me and Eddie sitting at a booth, and we're both smiling, and we're just sitting there hanging out. And I said, "Oh my God, when was this taken?" I'm looking at my hair and looking at how I looked, and I said, "Well, it must have been a long, long time ago." But Eddie's hair was kind of short and curly, and uh, yeah. But well, the rainbow was just such a. It's gone. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
there, but I said that whole with the whole Hollywood scene is gone, in my opinion. I still go to the Rainbow once in a while and get my soup and love their soup. But then the cook died. He was there 40 years. And then Mario Maglieri, who owned the whiskey and the Rainbow, he owned them both. So he passed away. So it's just like an era that's gone. But I have a picture somewhere where you literally would walk in there if you were a fan of rock stars and musicians, and you really couldn't get in. You had to pay to get in if you weren't somebody. You had to pay, and they gave you a two drink ticket. But you'd walk in, and I remember looking. Okay, there's Rob Halford. There's Roy James Dio sitting next to him in the next booth. There's the Van Halen boys in the back. There's the Quiet Riot guys over there. There's Priest. I mean, it was just all ass to elbow rock stars. Because when you play the Forum or anywhere, everybody would bolt, for the Rainbow because they used to be open later, even like till 3 in the morning. But now, so those days are gone. I mean, but yeah, was it exciting? Hell yeah! And then, like, there's been all these documentaries now, about the Rainbow, movies about it.
Yeah, yeah.
That people don't realize before the rock scene, it was John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd and Chevy Chase and all these comedians from Saturday Night Live and they and Alice Cooper and they were all hanging out there. And they finally put a piece of plexiglass upstairs uh, uh, because they all signed their name in this post. There was one private booth. It's kind of strange. It was kind of hidden. It was real dark. And he had to step down a few steps and was surrounded by walls upstairs. And that was their hang. And I can't remember what they called themselves. It's something, Hollywood Vampires, I think. And they signed all their names. And, over the years, people started putting their names and adding. And so they finally put a piece of plexiglass over that to protect it. So there was that scene, the 70s, where all the TV stars were going there and movie stars and I remember seeing Jack Nicholson in there and like God, old movie chicks that were movie stars and stuff.
It's incredible.
And it was really, I would say yes, it was exciting. What people don't talk about a lot is the main club that we played at, and Van Halen and Quiet Riot and everybody and their mother, Y&T, Judas Priest, was a place called the Starwood. And that was like 4 blocks down from the Whiskey on Santa Monica Boulevard. And for 4 or 5 years, that was the place in the mid-'80s that everybody wanted to play. And it was really a cool place. And it was laid out where you could be in the concert place and watch the band, or you could walk down a little hallway and there was a little restaurant. They made burgers and fries, and you could keep going. And it went into like a dance room where they were spinning records. So you could get away from the madness and just listen to music. But the upstairs of that place, again, was upstairs. You couldn't get up there unless you knew somebody, and until I played there so many times, they finally knew who I was. But, I'd go up there and there'd be Kiss sitting there and Alice Cooper and Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley and they're all up. They're on the hunt.
Did Motley Crue play their first ever gig there?
Yeah, Motley Crue played their first gig there, I think, before they, the club got shut down. Because there was a lot of weird stuff going on at that club. The owners were involved with that infamous murder with John Holmes, the porn star, and a bunch of people got killed up in Coldwater Canyon over drugs, and those owners were involved in that. So, and there was a lot of drugs. I know exactly who had them, and they've now passed away. So I guess I could say I always seen that Kevin DuBrow always had Quaaludes on him, which was a pill that was popular in the 80s. Now that they don't exist anymore. And, like this, the whole thing was you gave a girl a Quaalude and it makes you uninhibited and made your chances of scoring a lot easier. So he always had that stuff. And I remember, they only had one bathroom up there and I was always trying to get in there. And it just seemed like every time I wanted to go in there, David was in there, locked himself in the bathroom, getting a quickie. I'm like, David, come on, man. Come on, go get a room, man.
Legend. The 80s was that time of unbelievable decadence, but some people's decadence, some people's wasn't for everybody. I mean, I've seen you quoted before as saying that you were never really into the drug scene, the cocaine thing, but you were more of a champagne and wine man.
Yeah, that's what it was. I would drink a rum and coke or something like that, or have some kind of a vodka grapefruit once in a while. But I just never got into the heavy drinking, and the coke thing. I didn't get it. I just didn't get it, because first of all, it's bad for your throat, and I just didn't get it. I was hyper enough already. I didn't need to be any more hyper. But like they said, they say in many movies that if you bought cocaine in the '80s, there's an 80% chance it came from Carlos
Ugh.
Escobar. Because and apparently it was like real pure, and you didn't get all, there was not stuff in it to make you speedy and something like that. They said it was like the real deal, but it just wasn't my cup of tea. I don't know. I was so uh, I guess obsessed. I look back now. I was just talking about the other night on the road. We just got home 3 days ago. It was a really rough tour in the East Coast, and I said, man, I look back and I kept thinking, I just want to headline the whiskey one day. That was my mountain. I wanted to headline the whiskey someday on a Friday night. That was my that I wasn't thinking about the arenas and 10,000 people and selling millions of records. It really never was on my radar because it really did seem unachievable to me. But I thought, well, if we can become a local band and we're popular and I have a job and and we'll do this until we can't do it anymore. So I have to. People have asked me. A lot of musicians said, what's the secret, Don? And how'd you get famous? And I said, look, I'm not bullshitting you when I say this. I guess it's half talent and half luck. It's just the right time at the right place. If I wouldn't have met Dieter Dirks, you know, just by chance, you know, uh, I never would have got to sing on the Scorpions album, and the manager of Accept happened to be in there, and she took my cassette to Germany, and it's all well documented. And I got my first record deal on Carrera for a whopping 8,000. I mean, it was in marks, and I didn't know what marks, how much the difference was, and it was something like I don't know 30,000 marks or something, or 20,000. And I said to Michael Wagner, who was with me, I said, "How much money is that?" And he goes, "About $8,500." So I always remember my first record deal being eighty five
Well,
hundred
that was
bucks,
it,
and that was my budget.
that was some story, wasn't it? I mean, you spent a bit of time in Germany before, and then you end up at Dieter
Yeah,
Dirk's studio, which is out near Cologne, and then there was the meeting with Accept's manager, Gabby Hauke,
Gabby Halka.
and
Yeah,
her getting the tape, and then you getting the deal with Carrera. I mean, that was almost like a perfect jigsaw puzzle of pieces just slotting into place.
yeah, but think about if I didn't. I do remember the day I was supposed to leave for Germany. Uh, well, my first tour of Germany in '79, I went played clubs, and I remember I almost didn't make the plane. I almost didn't go, and it was a nightmare. We were on one of those charter planes, and cheap tickets, and we're all squeezed together, and we took our equipment, and we show up at the airport, and we've got like drums, amplifiers, guitars. You can't do that anymore. And then we showed up at the quote unquote excess baggage, and we're wheeling carts of equipment out to the runway long before 9/11, and bringing all our junk with us. And it was funny. I look back now, it was hilarious when the guy goes, "These are your bags." Yeah, we got 12. But and then again, if I wouldn't have went to Germany in '79, did that club tour, I wouldn't have met uh, Dieter, because we went to Germany, and of course Juan Crucier was the original member of Dokken, and we were a three-piece, and I was still lead singer, lead guitar player, and they had a kid drive us around. He was like 21 years old. I remember his name was Nicola France, and apparently he had done the first U.S. tour of the Scorpions because their English wasn't very well, and he spoke perfect English. So he started telling me he knew the Scorpions, and I went, "Oh wow, really?" I said, "Can you introduce me to Dieter Dirks?" And he said, "Yeah, maybe if you come back again." So it's all this acts of God, in my opinion, the kid that drives us around Germany. Turned out he was the interpreter for the Scorpions. He knew Dieter, and then we go back a year and a half later and do another tour of Germany. And we, the cool thing about that now, looking back, is we played the exact same clubs that are mostly gone now that the Beatles played, the Star Club and the Top Ten and the Reeperbahn, the Hooker Street.
Oh.
It's that Reeperbahn is all hookers, and it's just funny you can have that in America. So for me to go to Germany, I said, so you tell me this one special couple streets, prostitution's allowed, because it was one of the biggest seaports in the world, Hamburg. And the government, I think they did a clever thing. They thought, we'll just make this area legal, and the girls have to be checked and have a card that they don't have their own diseases. And it became an infamous, just row after row of Eros Center. And
it still is.
Underground. It still is. I haven't been there in a long time. Yeah, it's still there, I guess.
Oh, yeah. It's still very much there, down there. I mean, your musical influences, I was going to say at the time, your musical influences, a lot of the new wave of British heavy metal. You were listening to a lot of Judas Priest and Saxon as well.
Love Saxon. And I love Priest. I remember when I first bought Sad Wings of Destiny, I remember getting on the phone and literally calling everybody I knew and said, you've got to come over to the house. This album is going to blow you away. Even though when I was 14, I played my first show. I remember the first record I ever bought was a 45. I think the band was called The Sound Machine or something. And the song was called Incense and Peppermint.
Yeah.
And incense, peppermints, da-da-da-da. And I'm like, what are they talking about? Nobody knew. But it was just, that was my first record. But, I was buying, and then my first album was Fresh Cream. And that blew my mind. And then it became this thing like, we're broke. I can't afford a record. I had no money. I'm a little kid, and every time somebody buy a new record, what do you got? What do you got? And we'd all just go to each other's houses and listen to whatever they had gotten, and flip it over and play it over and over and over and over and over. We just play it like 10 times, and just be in awe of this new sound. I say now, the 60s was a new sound for me, because we're talking about 1966, the Beatles and all that was going on. And then the cool thing about me living in Lake Tahoe for a couple of years, up in Truckee on the Lake Tahoe, it was like being an Opie, from Andy Griffith's show. There was no crime, there was no gangs. I didn't know what a gang was. It was just, and every kid in that high school, parents had the same business. They all had motels for the ski bunnies, because it was famous. The Olympics were held in Squaw Valley.
Yeah.
So I got a job there as a busboy. And so we all had the same parents kind of things running motels, my mom as well, and they worked at the casinos, because you only had to walk a mile from where I lived in California, and you're on the Nevada side. And then that's where Frank Sinatra built the club, the Cal Neva. So I have that experience. When I tell people, they think I'm just making up stories. And I said, oh, yeah, I met Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin. And
you met all these guys.
I met them all because my mom was really beautiful. And Frank liked her. And he put her in what they call the green room.
Yeah.
She was really pretty, and she was a blonde. And she was serving these guys drinks and dinner. And sometimes she'd take me with her, and I had to stay back in the kitchen in the green room. She'd kind of smuggle me in, and I'd help her, clear off the tapes, the tables and stuff. And I remember there was that one guy, I wish I could remember his name. He was famous for being sarcastic. And
cool, not Don Rickles.
Yeah, Don Rickles.
It was Don Rickles.
Yeah, it was Don Rickles, because Frank was kind of a no-show a lot.
Yeah.
It'd say Frank Sinatra on September, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden he wouldn't show up. And Don Rickles would be a stand-in. Excuse me. And I remember the guys would tip me a buck or two, and he always go, "You cheap bastards! Come on, man, give the kids some money." And he'd throw a $20 bill down. I was like, and all I was thinking is, I could buy like 3 or 4 albums with that. And he'd berate the other guys because that was his shtick. So yeah, I met everybody. I met everybody. I met Sammy Davis Jr. I met them all. Not met them. I mean, I was around them in the back, and my only memories that everybody was chain smoking and drinking like fish, and my mom, was manhandling the green room. So I met all these famous people, but that didn't really have an effect on me because at that age, I wasn't impressed. If I
Yeah.
would have met I would have met some musician, I probably would have blown my mind. But so an interesting thing about meeting famous people, and you're not really goo goo gaga over them. So I did that, and Don Rickles would always give him shit about giving me a bigger tip. So I have to give him credit for letting me buy more records.
And now tell me, it is the 40th anniversary of that original release of Breaking the Chains on Carrera, which was
Yeah.
Saxon's label in the early days as well. You go back. Do you ever go back and sit back and listen to it? Because I put it on again the other day. When you think of the first track on that album, it makes a hell of a statement because it's such a great song for a debut song on a debut album. It was some statement you made with that.
Yeah, I mean, do you think about it now lyrically? It's so prophetic that I'm writing about sitting in my room, and you feel the pressure, and you got where to go. Basically, that whole song is just about being no hope, and no money and no future, and that whole song is about no hope. Break the chains. Nobody can stop you. I wrote the whole song about I have no future. So it was kind of like a prophetic that I wrote Breaking the Chains.
Do you remember making the video for the song? Because MTV had just launched, and you made a video which had George Lynch playing guitar, which had chains on it and not strings.
Yeah, it's pretty embarrassing, actually.
What?
I mean, I look back at that and I go, oh my God. I mean, it was a pretty cheesy video. And we got the manager, and it's funny, the manager that actually called me out of the blue. When Breaking the Chains came out, I have, I think, one copy left. When it came out in Germany, it didn't say Dokken on it. It said Don Dokken. There was no Dokken. It was just called Don Dokken. And there's a picture of me on the cover. So that's when down the road, George and Jeff, or George and Mick joined the band. Juan left. We found Jeff at a bar, playing Little Red Corvette. But I think it's prophetic. And then I look back at the fond memories of, Accept was in there, and Scorpions were making Blackout, and I think there's a band called Raven. There's a lot of German bands that I don't know what happened to them, but trust me, I can look. We're talking about this now, and I'm thinking, at any given point, something could have maybe not happened, and we wouldn't be talking right now. If I didn't go to
Absolutely.
Germany the second time, if I didn't meet
Yeah.
Dieter Dirks, if I didn't go to Germany, I could have stayed in L.A. and made a record.
What are your memories of touring around Europe aside from Germany? I mean, you say you obviously you were big in the USA as the 80s were going on. You were huge in
Yeah.
Japan. Why do you think it was harder to crack the rest of Europe?
I don't know, and we gave it our valiant attempt. I remember our manager. We were on tour with Aerosmith, and it was their permanent vacation tour, as they call it, their first sober tour. They were drug free and alcohol free, and
Yeah.
they admitted it. And Stephen and Joe walked around with these T-shirts that the Toxic Twins, and they were really nervous about us going on tour with them because by then, unfortunately, the other three members of my band had gone headlong off the cliff into cocaine, which started the rift. I mean, the George and I rift started before we even got a record out. So, they played on Breaking the Chains, but I had just hired them, and brought them over from America because I'd known them from the band The Boys. And, here I got a record deal with Carrera. And I got to get, and the only reason I signed with Carrera was I asked Gabi, what's Carrera Records? They're a French label. And I'm like, and they go, well, they got Saxon. I said, they got Saxon? Well, that's pretty cool. Okay, I'm in good company. But all the other bands they had, I never heard of. They were like these very famous German. One guy's name was Peter Maffay. He was like the Elvis of Germany. There was a guy named Udo Lindenberg, and I said it was a very strange music in German, and it was called Schlager. I think they called it Schlager, and it was some kind of a trippy kind of music that the Germans were really into at that time. They were kind of going through their weird pop alternative phase, but there was no rock bands on Carrera except that Saxon I know of. So, I was like, I'm going to be on a record company with all these strange music. But the guy liked me, and my memory of signing that deal is just like the movie. The guy sitting there, Ralph Barlow, and he's got the big cigar in his mouth, he's got his suit on, a big desk, and just like in the movies. And I walk in to sign the deal, and you're like, hey, kid, I'm going to make you a star, And I'm like, oh, okay, great. And Michael drove me around because I didn't know how to get my way around Germany. And I just remember we signed about noon, and Michael and I went to both go down to the Reeperbahn, and I wanted leather. That was right when the whole metal thing, Priest was starting the whole studs on the leather jackets, remember? Especially the Germans. Yeah. They all had you could buy that stud maker, and you could make put studs through your jacket, and then people started going bonkers where it was like solid studs. And I went and bought a leather jacket, and Michael bought a leather jacket, and I cashed the check literally within an hour, 2 hours, the record deal. And we had the money in the trunk of Michael's car in like a little suit, like a little briefcase. And we parked in front of a jewelry store, and we opened up the trunk, and we were getting money, out of the trunk. And there's this big wad of money. It looked like, it was marks, $8,500. And in marks, though, it was looked like a lot of money. And somebody, a policeman or somebody, saw that, and they arrested us. And I'm like, and they're literally like pulled out machine guns, like real machine guns. And they're saying, lay down, on the ground. And I'm like, no, I'm not laying down. And I started going into my tirade about, I'm an American, you can't do this to me, and I want to talk to the embassy, I've had a record deal for less than one day, and now I'm going to jail. And they immediately told Michael to open the trunk up. They took the money, and they're like, aha, these guys are crooks or bank robber, whatever the hell they thought we were. So they took us to jail, and I was just irate that they took my money, and so they took Michael into one room, Wagner, before he was famous, and he was just an engineer working in Hamburg, and they took me in another room, and so they wanted to make sure our stories were straight. And then I remember they brought the money back in. I made them count it out for me, and had to look at the receipts for the jackets and figure out how much was left, and yada, yada, yada. And then I remember the only good thing about that was when they made me get on the ground, the cop took my little camera and threw it on the ground, and it broke. And so they're going to let me go. We're wanting to get the hell out of there. And they had to call Rolf, the record company president. So here I've only had a record deal for less than 8 hours. And the police are calling him saying, we have this guy, Don Dokken, in jail, and he says you gave him this money. And he says, yeah, I just signed him a record deal and put him on the phone. And he says, Don, I already know you're going to be trouble. So I started my whole first day of a record contract going to jail. And Raul's like, he's just shaking his, I can tell he's just sitting in his office going, oh boy, I don't know about what have I done now. So that was kind of funny. It kind of wasn't. So I started to leave and I said, no, I want my camera, and you broke it. So they took me down to this room with like, I don't know, 500 cameras and all this stolen stuff. And they said, which one was it? And I go, and I just looked around the room and went, I think it was that one. And I tried to pick out the most expensive camera I could find. So I had a little $50 camera and I walked out with a $300 camera. So,
Hey, tell me, on that tour with Steven Tyler and Aerosmith, the Permanent Vacation tour, was that true that you named your son after Steven Tyler because he was actually born when you were on the tour?
yes, I was. Steve and I were just hanging out, after the show one night and being dogs, on the Aerosmith tour, and all the guys in Dokken, we were all young and cute, and backstage, I mean, it was holy cow. I mean, I have pictures, and I actually burned a lot of them. Uh, I had to, I had to, because that was back in the day of Polaroids. So, and we were starting to realize that with fame, you can get away with murder. And we go into this room where they corral all the girls, and literally, it'd be like penthouse Playboy, runway models, Russian models. Just the security guards and all the crew would pick out the best of the best. And so you walk into a room just full of gorgeous women. And I was just like, holy mackerel. But yeah, I remember Steve and I were sitting around in this room after dinner one night backstage, and somebody came up to me and said, hey, you got a phone call. And it was Sue, Tyler's mother, and said, he just got born. I want to name him John. And I said, John, that's a biblical name. Do we have to go down that road? And even though we weren't married, so that's when I just said to Stephen, I said, what would you name your kid if you were to have a kid? He goes, well, I'd probably name him Tyler, when I have some kids. And I said, well, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to name him Tyler. And I said, you're the unofficial godfather. And that was it. Tyler was born, and that's why he's named Tyler.
You really were flying at the top of your game. You'd had 3 platinum albums on the bounce then, and you took Nail Under Lock and Key, back for the Attack as well. You'd got great press all over Europe. You were in Kerrang an awful lot actually at that time, and it seemed that you were primed, ready for that hyper leap into mega star status. You had Q Prime behind you. When you look back now, do you look at it as it was an opportunity that was missed, or that all things happen for a reason?
It was opportunity missed, and it happened for a reason, because I remember we could have done the second leg of the Aerosmith tour. So I'm happy, and they treat us really well. We had full lights, full PA, and they gave us nice dressing rooms, and they treat us very respectfully, unlike some bands I've toured with where they give you nothing, and the PA's barely turned on because their egos can't handle it, that they're going to get blown off stage by us. And I'm like, so I'll just turn their PA down and give them no spotlight and make them play in the dark practically, which really drove me crazy. And I was, poor Cliff, he was such a good guy, but I was calling him every other day, complaining and whining about, I want lights, and how come they're treating us like this? But Aerosmith was different. But I remember we were taking a break, and we had the second leg of Aerosmith too. And Cliff said, I think you should leave the tour. And I said, you've lost your mind, right? I mean, why would you want to leave the tour? And he says, I think I can get you. He always believed that he was right. He was right. What he did with Metallica, he was going to do with us first. But he always said, someday, Don, this is all going to go away, and you'll have your day in the sun right now in America. But rock stars come and go in this country, but he said if you can get a foothold in Europe, a real foothold, like Saxon has, and Priest, and look at Accept, and all those bands are still going strong. And these festivals, he said, your next tour, you'll be touring the world, and if you break out in Europe, it's done. It's a done. You can maintain your career for the rest of your career just out of Europe. And we didn't want to go, because I thought playing with AC/DC is kind of like opening up for God. I mean,
Yeah.
who wants to open up for AC/DC? I mean, you can't. I don't care how good you are. They're AC/DC. They're the biggest band in the world. And they had the bell. It was after Bon had passed, and I was really scared. I didn't want to go, and how funny. I didn't want to go because I was afraid of the pressure. I remember the band saying, we don't want to go because it's all guys, there's no chicks, and there's no drugs. And I went, what a reason to not want to go to Europe, even though I'd gone to Germany twice and played little clubs, and I was like, every show we did, they were very tough. We had no roadies or anything, and we're dragging our amplifiers down the street. And they didn't want to go because of the large male audience that AC/DC had, and all in their leather jackets and jean jackets, and the girls that were there looked like they got hit by a truck, and so and here we just come off the Aerosmith tour, and that's why they didn't want to go. But Cliff said, "You're going." In fact, we didn't get paid for that tour. We had to pay AC/DC $50,000 to be on the tour.
Oh, that's unbelievable.
It was a buy-on. And I remember the first couple shows, I thought we were doing great. 'Cause, in between songs, I didn't talk much on stage because if you're in Italy, I don't speak Italian, and we're in France, I don't speak French. And so I just say, drop the F-bomb or whatever. We just kind of played song after song after song. But I remember the depressing part of that tour was every time we'd stop, we had to learn not to stop too long because the audience started chanting. And I couldn't really tell what they were chanting. I thought they were saying Dokken, Dokken. No, they were chanting Angus, Angus, Angus. And as a singer, man, my ego was deflated. Especially coming off the Aerosmith tour where we're famous, we're stars, everybody loves me and my band, and all of a sudden we're in Germany and they're chanting Angus. And I'm like,
did you not have a bit of an incident with you and George on your way to the AC/DC gig at Wembley Arena? Or was that a bit of folklore?
No, unfortunately it's true. But I mean, we had many incidences, and it was getting worse and worse, and I just didn't know what to do, I mean, I can't, George and I get along now, but, I don't want to throw him under the bus, but I can because he spent 15 years when he was in the band throwing me under the bus. Because everybody always asks, why did the band break up? And they just point the finger at me. And they say Don broke up the band because he wanted money and he was greedy, and but it was all untrue. I signed the worst band agreement in history. It was a 4-way split. Every dollar I made, Jeff got $1, Mick got $1, George got $1. So Cliff made us do that so we wouldn't argue about who wrote what and publishing and all that. Everything was split 4 ways. So there was no reason for me to want to leave for a monetary value. And but George and I didn't get along from before Breaking the Chains ever came out. I mean, Breaking the Chains, I remember I flew him over there. Mick cut the drums. George did about 2/3 of the rhythm tracks. He'd done about half the solos. And I woke up one day and they had left. And I freaked out. And I said, what do you mean they'd left? And Michael said, they left this morning and they decided they want to go back to America. But the record wasn't done. And I'm like, oh man. So that's how it started. And everything started out ugly. Like Cliff said to me once, Bernstein said, you guys are getting more and more famous despite yourselves.
Well, that was Don Dokken talking to me just the other day from his home in New Mexico, looking back on a 40-year career. Now, we've got more to come as well from that interview, and you can hear it in the next edition of the show. Well, that is it for this program. Don't forget, if you want to get in touch, you can via the website at www.theclassicrockpodcast.com, or you can do it via Facebook as well. So, until the next time, do enjoy the holidays, have a great new year. And from me, Tim Caple, till next time, bye-bye.